Marcus knew something was wrong the moment he turned the corner onto Sycamore Lane. His daughter Lena wasn't waving from the porch like she usually did. No sketch pad in her lap, no ranger barking excitedly from the doorway, no soft music playing from the open window. Instead, she sat hunched at the base of their front steps, legs twisted awkwardly to one side, crutches splayed on the concrete beside her, one elbow scraped raw and bleeding. Her face was blotchy with tears, her chest heaving in small, sharp breaths. Marcus threw the truck into park and bolted out, heart slamming into his throat. "Lena!" he shouted, sprinting across the lawn. She looked up and tried to smile, but couldn't. I fell," she whispered, reaching out with one trembling arm. "The ramp, it's gone." Marcus skidded to a stop beside her and stared at the porch. His stomach twisted. She was right. The ramp, the one he had spent 2 full weekends building with his bare hands, cutting lumber at night, and installing rails while she napped, was gone. All that remained were a few bolt holes and uneven shadows where the boards had once rested. Rage bloomed behind his eyes. He lifted Lena gently into his arms and carried her up the steps, barely noticing the pain shooting up his back. "Who did this?" he growled. "Who touched this house?" A voice behind him answered. Mr. Hollis, the elderly neighbor who rarely spoke unless something serious was happening. "It was the HOA, Marcus," he said softly, eyes filled with shame. "Dolores came by with 2 men while you were at work. Said the ramp wasn't approved. Said it disrupted the visual flow of the neighborhood. Ordered them to pull it down." Marcus blinked, stunned. "She did what?" Mr. Hollis swallowed. "She said, and I quote, 'If that girl can go to school, she can learn to use stairs like everyone else.'" The blood in Marcus's veins turned to ice. Dolores Whitaker, the HOA vice president, ruler of lawn signs and mailbox height standards, had ripped his daughter's only means of safe access from their home because it didn't match her suburban sense of style. Marcus handed Lena her crutches, placed her gently on the couch, and stormed out the front door without another word. He didn't stop to lock it. He didn't stop to think. He walked straight across the street to the Whitaker house, fists clenched, vision blurring with fury. Dolores was outside, trimming her hydrangeas like she hadn't just committed a crime against a child. "You touch my property again," Marcus growled, "and I swear to God, I will bring the full weight of hell down on this neighborhood." Dolores didn't flinch. She just tilted her sunglasses and said, "Cool as ever. Perhaps next time, Mr. Ford, you'll follow the architectural guidelines like everyone else." That was the moment Marcus knew this wasn't just about a ramp. It was about dignity and power. And she had just started a war. Marcus never imagined he'd be a single father. Not like this. He'd always pictured standing beside his wife in a quiet hospital room, holding her hand, crying together as they welcomed their baby girl into the world. But the day Lena was born was the day everything changed. Complications hit hard, too fast, too severe. There was internal bleeding, panic in the delivery room, voices shouting over machines, and then silence. They handed him Lena swaddled, and so small it felt like she'd disappear in his arms, and told him his wife didn't make it. He held his newborn daughter as tears soaked into her blanket, promising her she would never, ever feel abandoned. But the road ahead wasn't easy. From the very beginning, Lena's movements were off, her little limbs stiff, her muscles tight. Doctors said the words that would define their lives: spastic cerebral palsy. It meant her muscles would fight her. Walking would be difficult, maybe impossible. She'd likely need assistance for life. For a man who had spent years in the Marines, who could carry engines and replace axles without flinching, the news broke him in places no battlefield ever had. But looking into Lena's bright eyes, he knew. If she had to fight this, then so would he. Every single day, there were surgeries, physical therapy, equipment fittings, falls, tears, small victories that felt enormous. Her first unassisted step with braces, the day she fed herself without help, the time she stood long enough to brush her own hair. Marcus worked 2 jobs to cover what insurance wouldn't. Nights as a mechanic, weekends fixing old boats in a friend's yard, odd jobs at construction sites just for extra cash. Every dime went to Lena, her therapy, her braces, the modifications she needed. When she turned 9, Lena asked if she could walk into school like the other kids. Marcus couldn't make that happen, but he could build something that helped her get closer. So he started on the ramp. No fancy contractor. Just him, lumber, screws, and long nights in the garage. He measured every angle, sanded every edge, made sure the incline was gentle enough for Lena to manage with her crutches. He painted it soft gray to match the porch added side rails and put rubber mats down for grip. It wasn't pretty, maybe, but it was sturdy. Safe. Hers. The day Lena used it for the first time, she cried, but not from pain. She walked out of the house by herself, sat on the porch, and drew the clouds. Watched the neighborhood kids play. She smiled at Marcus and said, "I did it, Daddy. I got here on my own." That ramp became more than wood and nails. It was a line in the sand between dependence and independence, between isolation and freedom. And for Marcus, it was a symbol of something more. That despite everything life had stolen from her, Lena would still rise. So, when he found the listing for a home in Sycamore Glen, he thought it would be a sanctuary. The flyers called it safe, clean, quiet, a community that cares. They'd driven through on a Sunday afternoon, and the streets were lined with trimmed trees, kids on bikes, neighbors walking dogs. He thought, this is where she'll be safe. This is where we'll breathe. He didn't know then what hid behind those flower beds and white fences. He didn't know about Dolores Whitaker, about the clipboard inspections, about the bylaws that prioritized curb appeal over compassion. He thought he was giving his daughter a better life. But when he saw her sitting on the cold concrete, bruised and defeated because someone decided her independence was an eyesore, he realized he hadn't moved her into safety. He'd moved her into a battleground. And now, everything he had worked for was under attack. Dolores Whitaker didn't walk through Sycamore Glen, she patrolled it. Her gait was sharp, deliberate, heels clicking against the concrete like a metronome of judgment. Always in a navy blue pantsuit, clipboard clutched tight against her chest, and oversized sunglasses that made her expression unreadable, she was the vice president of the HOA, and everyone knew she had more power than the president himself. Dolores didn't smile. She inspected. Every Monday morning, like clockwork, she strolled through the neighborhood for her compliance tour. She'd pause at houses like she was a general surveying enemy territory, measuring the angle of lawn sprinklers, inspecting porch lights for brightness violations, and occasionally knocking on doors to remind residents of the importance of uniformity. Her favorite phrase was always the same: "We're not trying to restrict anyone, we're just protecting property values." No one dared challenge her, at least not publicly. Families whispered about how she once fined the Turners $100 for a pastel chalk mural their daughter drew on their driveway, claimed it violated the natural color scheme of pavement. Another neighbor received a warning for a patriotic door wreath she deemed seasonally ambiguous. There was even a story about her reporting a man for untrimmed hedges that implied neglect. He'd been out of town for his mother's funeral. So when Marcus and Lena moved in, Dolores noticed. She made no comment about their race. Of course, Dolores was far too careful for that. But her actions spoke volumes. Within 3 days of the ramp's completion, Marcus found a folded notice on his porch. Unapproved exterior structure constructed without architectural committee approval. Ramp does not match neighborhood materials or slope regulations. He called the HOA office the next morning. The woman who answered said there was a process: submit a form, photos, measurements. Marcus complied. He hand-delivered the documents, even emailed a follow-up with receipts from the building materials. Weeks passed, no reply. Then another notice came, second and final warning. If unapproved structure is not removed within 10 days, HOA reserves the right to take corrective action. Marcus tried to reach Dolores directly. She never answered. When he showed up at a board meeting, she cut him off mid-sentence, saying, "Sir, if every homeowner built whatever they wanted, we'd have tree houses and tire swings in every yard. This isn't a playground." He explained Lena's condition, her mobility needs. How much work went into the ramp. Dolores replied flatly, "Then perhaps a home without steps would have suited your family better." The room went silent. Someone on the board shifted uncomfortably, but no one said a word. Marcus left before his anger boiled over. Behind closed doors, some neighbors muttered their support. "She's out of control," one whispered. "She fined my mom for leaving her cane on the porch." But when asked to speak up, they shook their heads. "You don't understand. If you cross her, she'll find something. She always does." Dolores Whitaker ruled through fear disguised as policy, and she believed in one thing above all: aesthetics over accessibility. That ramp didn't fit her vision of Sycamore Glen, so she erased it, and in doing so, she made her biggest mistake yet. She thought Marcus Ford would stay quiet. Before the ramp, mornings were harder on both of them. Marcus would set his alarm an hour earlier just to make sure he had time to carry Lena down the front steps without rushing. She always tried to be brave about it, gripping his neck tightly with her thin arms, her legs dangling, stiff and trembling. "I can do it myself," she would whisper, even though they both knew she couldn't. The steps outside their home looked ordinary to most people, but to Lena, they were a daily reminder of what her body couldn't do. Every descent was a risk. If it rained, they stayed home. If it snowed, Marcus called off work. He hated watching her cling to him like that, hated the fear in her eyes when she asked, "What if you fall?" There was no backup plan, no railing strong enough for her to manage on her own, no miracle cure that would suddenly make her legs obey her commands. And she knew it. Worse than the stairs was school. The bus pulled up at the curb every morning, and Marcus would walk Lena down to it, her crutches clicking against the pavement. She wore braces up to her knees and walked like she was crossing a tightrope, slow, cautious, unsure. The kids didn't always say things out loud, but their eyes did enough damage. Sometimes it was snickers. Sometimes it was silence. But Lena felt it all. "She walks like a robot," one boy whispered once, loud enough to sting. Another time, a girl laughed and asked if Lena's legs were as broken as her shoes. That night, Lena locked herself in the bathroom. Marcus heard her crying through the door, but didn't push her to come out. He sat outside and talked to her like she could hear his heart. "You're strong, baby. You're the strongest person I know. One day, they're going to wish they had half your courage." Still, it wore on her. She stopped drawing, stopped asking to go to the library. She used to sit by the front window and sketch the clouds. Now she stayed in her room more, claiming she was tired, even though Marcus knew it was sadness. Then came the idea of the ramp. He remembered watching her try to climb the porch one day, just 3 steps, gripping the brick wall like it might save her. She slipped and scraped her hand, and when Marcus rushed to help her up, she said quietly, "I hate this house." That's when he knew. He stayed up late on his nights off, measuring lumber and watching videos. He sold a set of tools he swore he'd never part with to buy the grip mats. It wasn't fancy, but it was functional. And when it was done, when Lena rolled down that ramp for the first time, using her crutches independently and reached the sidewalk alone, she looked back at him with tears in her eyes. "I did it," she said. "I didn't need help." From that day forward, everything changed. She started drawing again, big, colorful pieces taped to the porch railings. She waved at neighbors. Ranger would curl up beside her as she drew. Her confidence returned in small pieces, like puzzle parts finally fitting into place. For once, Lena didn't feel like a burden in her own home. She felt like she belonged to the world again. And then, in a single afternoon, it was all ripped away, because someone decided her courage didn't match the color palette of the neighborhood. Marcus's blood boiled as he stood on Dolores Whitaker's perfectly manicured front lawn, fists clenched, jaw tight. She was trimming her hedges again, snip, 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 like she hadn't just ripped a piece of his daughter's life out of existence. He didn't yell. Not yet. He walked straight up to her, eyes dark and steady. "You had no right," he said, voice low but razor sharp. "You touched my property. You destroyed my daughter's ramp." Dolores paused, tilted her sunglasses down the bridge of her nose, and regarded him as if he were tracking mud onto her white carpet. If you're referring to the structure in front of your porch, it was an unapproved modification, she said crisply. We gave you written warnings, Mr. Ford. I submitted the approval forms weeks ago, Marcus snapped, and no one replied. You ignored me. She waved one gloved hand dismissively. It didn't match the aesthetic. And honestly, if your daughter is old enough to attend school, she's old enough to use stairs. Marcus stepped forward. She has cerebral palsy. Dolores raised an eyebrow. I'm not unfamiliar with disability accommodations, but we can't make special exceptions for everyone. Then the neighborhood falls into chaos. We have rules for a reason. You tore down her independence, Marcus growled. You made her crawl. If that's how you choose to see it, she said coolly, returning to her hedge. Now, if you'll excuse me, he didn't answer. He turned and walked back across the street, fists trembling, pulse pounding in his ears. He opened his phone and called the police. Yes, he said. I want to file a theft and destruction of private property report. Someone removed a custom structure from my home without consent. An officer came by that afternoon, took notes, nodded sympathetically, but the minute Marcus mentioned the HOA and their so-called jurisdiction, the officer's expression changed. He scribbled something down and said, You'll want to take this up in civil court. HOA disputes can get messy. Technically, they can act on what they deem violations, especially if they believe safety is involved. Safety? Marcus scoffed. That ramp was the safety. The officer didn't argue, just handed him a case number and left. Later that evening, Marcus stayed late at the garage to cool off. When he came home around dusk, he found Lena sitting on the top step, tears streaking down her face. Ranger barked from the doorway, pacing nervously. The porch light was already on, casting shadows across the bruises on Lena's legs. Marcus dropped everything and rushed over. What happened? Lena wouldn't meet his eyes. I tried to get to the mailbox, she whispered, her voice cracking. I just wanted to send my thank you letter to Ms. Ramos from therapy. She motioned weakly toward the envelope still clutched in her trembling hand. I thought if I took it slow, I could do it. Marcus knelt beside her and gently lifted her pant leg. Blood crusted the scrape on her shin. Her elbow was raw again. Her hands were shaking. I fell, she whispered. Twice, Marcus wrapped his arms around her tightly. She sobbed into his chest, small shoulders trembling, breath hiccuping with pain and humiliation. I don't want to live here anymore, she finally said. I hate this place. Marcus felt something break inside him. This was supposed to be home, a sanctuary where she could grow, smile, belong. Instead, it had become a battlefield where she was treated like clutter. He carried her inside, helped clean her wounds, and sat beside her until she fell asleep, her fingers clutching his sleeve like a lifeline. He stared out the window at the bare edge of the porch where the ramp once stood. It wasn't just the structure that was gone. It was trust. It was freedom. And that night, Marcus swore to himself he wouldn't let her suffer in silence. If no one else would fight for Lena's dignity, then he'd do it himself. And this time, there would be no retreat. Marcus sat in the garage, the lights off, the air heavy with the smell of motor oil and sawdust. The same tools that had built Lena's ramp just weeks ago now lay abandoned in the corner, silent and useless. He stared blankly at the for sale flyer in his hand, thumb brushing the edge of the paper like it might offer answers. A part of him was ready to quit, to pack up, move somewhere, anywhere, that didn't treat his daughter's existence as an inconvenience. He'd already called a realtor. The market was good. The neighborhood looked perfect on paper. Someone would snatch it up fast. He could start over. But where would they go? Would Lena always face people like Dolores? Would every street with white fences and trimmed lawns come with unspoken rules that punish difference? A knock at the open garage door pulled him from his thoughts. It was Janelle, Lena's longtime physical therapist. She stepped into the dim space, holding a small container of cookies and a look that said she knew too much. I heard what happened, she said softly, eyes flicking to the empty porch. She told me. Marcus ran a hand over his face. I don't know what to do anymore. I'm tired. She's tired. I'm selling the place. Janelle didn't move. You think moving will fix what happened? It'll get us away from her. Janelle stepped forward, placing the cookies down and pulling her phone from her coat pocket. I took this earlier, she said, swiping to a photo and turning the screen to him. It was Lena's knees, scraped, bruised, raw. The angle was close up, but the sadness in her hunched shoulders was unmistakable. I took it after she fell trying to reach the mailbox, Janelle said. She didn't cry until I asked if she wanted me to carry her. That's when she broke down, because she thought she had lost her independence. Marcus swallowed the lump in his throat. This isn't about a ramp, Janelle continued. It's about her rights. About every kid like her who's made to feel like they don't belong in their own neighborhood. Marcus looked at the photo, and then at the ramp's bolts, still embedded in the concrete like tiny wounds. That night, after Lena had gone to bed, Marcus opened his laptop. He uploaded the photo Janelle had shown him, captioned it with trembling hands. She has a condition, not a choice. A neighborhood meant to protect her, instead stripped her of dignity. Shame on Sycamore Glen. Hashtag accessibility is not optional hashtag, let Lena roll, he hit post. At first, nothing, then a comment, then 5, then a share, then hundreds. The post spread like wildfire. And with it, so did the truth. The breaking point had come. But Marcus had finally stopped breaking. Now, he was ready to fight. The post didn't just circulate, it detonated. Within 24 hours, Marcus's story had gone viral, shared across parenting groups, disability advocacy forums, and news stations from coast to coast. The hashtags hashtag Let Lena Roll and hashtag Ramp Rights were trending nationally by the end of the week. People were outraged, not just at what had been done, but at what it represented. Thousands commented that it reminded them of their own battles with inaccessible buildings, apathetic landlords, or hostile HOAs. This was no longer just about Lena. It was about a pattern, and now a movement. One of the first emails to land in Marcus's inbox was from Angela Lynn, a disability rights attorney from a national advocacy group called Pathways Forward. She had seen the post on Twitter and wrote, "Mr. Ford, what happened to your daughter is not just immoral, it's illegal. I'd be honored to represent your family pro bono." Marcus stared at the message, unsure if it was real. It was. Angela arrived in Sycamore Glen 2 days later with a rolling briefcase, a kind smile, and an encyclopedic knowledge of the Americans with Disabilities Act ADA. They met in Marcus's kitchen over coffee. Lena sat nearby, quietly coloring, while Angela explained next steps. "We'll be filing multiple claims," she said, tapping her notepad. First, an ADA violation under Title II, denial of reasonable accommodation. Second, a civil suit for destruction of medical equipment and emotional distress. Third, we'll report this to the city's code enforcement. That ramp was legal. Her removal of it was not. Marcus blinked. "We can really do all that?" Angela smiled. "We must." As the case gained traction, neighbors began to come forward. First privately, then publicly. Mr. Hollis wrote a letter describing what he'd witnessed the day Dolores ordered the ramp removed. A single mother named Kayla confessed that Dolores had fined her for installing a portable oxygen tank on her porch for her asthmatic son. Another neighbor brought receipts, literally showing that Dolores had refunded herself hundreds of HOA dollars for visual compliance work with no record of board approval. Then came the bombshell. Jim Caldwell, a former HOA president who had moved out the previous year, contacted Marcus. He submitted a sworn affidavit stating that Dolores had been warned twice by the board about overstepping her authority, particularly when it came to accessibility concerns. He had emails. He had meeting notes, and he wanted them made public. Angela compiled everything into a damning dossier. It was nearly 2 inches thick, bound and submitted to the city's Human Rights Commission. At the same time, she filed an injunction demanding immediate reinstatement of the ramp, or else Sycamore Glen would face sanctions and fines. Media vans rolled into the neighborhood by the following weekend. Reporters knocked on doors. Kids held up handmade signs that said ramps are rights and let Lena live. A local station caught Dolores on camera speedwalking into her garage. shielding her face with a gardening magazine. Then came the emergency HOA meeting. It was standing room only in the community clubhouse. The board sat stiffly at the front, eyes darting between papers and reporters. Dolores, surprisingly, was present, arms crossed, lips tight. Marcus arrived with Lena in her old chair and Angela beside him. When it was his turn to speak, the room fell silent. "My daughter didn't need pity," he said. "She needed a ramp. Instead, you let someone take it from her because it didn't match your shrubs or fences or whatever fantasy you have about what disability looks like. But guess what? It lives here, and it's not going anywhere." Applause erupted. Later that evening, after closed-door deliberations, the board issued a resolution. Dolores Whitaker is hereby suspended indefinitely from all HOA duties pending legal review. The HOA formally apologizes to the Ford family and commits to full ADA compliance moving forward. It wasn't justice, not yet, but it was a beginning. And for the first time in weeks, Lena smiled, not because someone gave her something, but because someone finally took a stand for her. The wave of public outrage didn't stop at Sycamore Glen's gates. It washed over the entire country. News outlets picked up the story like it was fuel for a fire already burning. Headlines blared. HOA removes disabled girls ramp, sparks nationwide backlash, community aesthetic, or human rights violation. Little girl, big fight. How Lena Ford stood tall without standing. Talk shows invited Marcus and Lena to speak, though Marcus only agreed to one, and even then only if Lena felt comfortable. She surprised him when she nodded and whispered, "I want to help other kids." On air, Lena sat quietly, her legs swinging slightly in her newly gifted custom wheelchair as she answered questions with honesty and softness. When asked what she would say to the people who took her ramp away, she said, "I don't want them to be punished. I just want them to know I still matter." It hit millions right in the heart. Disability rights advocates launched campaigns in Lena's name. A petition to strengthen ADA enforcement within residential communities gained over 600,000 signatures in 2 weeks. Parents across the country began sharing similar stories. Ramps removed, elevators disabled, parking spots repainted. The injustice was far from isolated. Lena's story became a mirror, forcing communities to see the ableism lurking in their own rules. Under mounting pressure, the city council held an emergency session. Within the month, they passed the Residential ADA Safeguards Ordinance, requiring all neighborhoods, including HOAs, to follow strict guidelines regarding accessibility, with steep penalties for violations. Sycamore Glen, once praised for its pristine lawns and curated living, was now a national example of what not to be. But some residents took that as a wake-up call. Ramps were added. Sidewalks were re-leveled. One neighbor even hand-built a bench with grab bars at the park entrance and painted a sign that said, "Lena's Spot, everyone welcome." As for Dolores Whitaker, her reign was over. She resigned from the HOA days after being suspended, her statement filled with hollow phrases about miscommunication and regretful optics. But the damage to her reputation was done. She lost her place in several civic groups. Her business affiliations pulled away. And for the first time in years, she became the one people crossed the street to avoid. Meanwhile, Lena kept drawing. She created a series of sketches called Roll With Me, portraits of kids like her, all in different settings, all smiling, all free. One of them was printed on shirts sold by a nonprofit. Proceeds went to build ramps in low-income neighborhoods. And though Marcus still couldn't believe how far things had gone, how wide Lena's story had spread, he knew this wasn't just about fixing one mistake. It was about changing the story for Lena and for every child who had ever been told they didn't belong on the front porch. It was early spring when the new ramp arrived. This time, it wasn't one Marcus had to build alone in the middle of the night. It was professionally designed, custom fit, and city approved. A crew of volunteers, neighbors, veterans, even a few contractors who had seen Lena's story online, showed up on a Saturday morning with drills, lumber, and coffee. Lena watched from the window, bundled in a hoodie, her eyes wide with quiet disbelief. The new ramp curved gently from the porch to the sidewalk like a bridge, not just a pathway. It had side rails, painted sky blue, her favorite color, and a small plaque at the base that read, Lena's Way, built with love, rolled with courage. When it was done, she insisted on going out alone. Marcus held the door as she maneuvered down the smooth incline, arms steady on her wheels. The wind brushed her face, and as she reached the bottom, she paused, then looked up at her dad with the biggest smile he'd seen in weeks. I feel tall, she said, and in that moment she was. Marcus felt a deep ache in his chest, not from pain, but from pride. Everything they'd been through, the scraped knees, the insults, the silence, the rage, had led here. Not just to a better ramp, but to something deeper. Lena had learned that her voice mattered, that being small didn't mean being invisible. And Marcus? He'd learned that silence could be just as dangerous as cruelty. He didn't stop there. With Angela's help, Marcus applied for and was appointed to a new city accessibility task force. His job was to review neighborhood policies, help reform building codes, and consult with HOAs on how to do better. Every time he walked into a boardroom, now people listened, not because he yelled, but because his story and Lena's had already changed minds across the country. At Sycamore Glen, things changed too. The HOA board was restructured. Accessibility training was mandated. A quarterly community meeting was introduced, and Lena was invited to speak at the first one. She rolled up to the microphone with Ranger at her side, glanced at the nervous-looking grown-ups, and simply said, I just want kids like me to be able to play outside too. That's all. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Back home, Lena kept sketching. Her art had matured, less about sadness now, more about strength. Her favorite piece, though, hung by the front door. It showed a little girl rolling down a ramp beneath a huge tree, with her arms wide open and the caption in big, bold letters, I belong here. And she did. They both did. Not just in their house, but in their neighborhood, their city, and this world that was finally learning that accessibility isn't a favor, it's a right. Just when Marcus thought things had finally settled, a plain, white envelope appeared in his mailbox. No return address, just his name printed neatly on the front. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Dear Mr. Ford, we are conducting a formal review of your recent social media activity and public statements regarding Sycamore Glen. Certain remarks may have violated the Community Defamation Clause, and your residency privileges are now under review. HOA Legal Affairs. Marcus stared at it, stunned. He looked toward the porch where Lena sat, sketching in the sun, her wheelchair resting proudly on the new ramp. They were still coming, still trying to silence him. But they didn't realize something had changed. He wasn't just defending his daughter anymore. He was defending every family they hadn't silenced yet. Backhand index pointing right, next episode. The HOA declares war behind closed doors. But Marcus finds an unlikely ally who knows their darkest secret.